The laughter echoed through the marble corridors of Mitchell Technologies like broken glass, each sound cutting deeper into Zara Washington's chest as she stood frozen outside the conference room door. She had come to deliver the quarterly reports that Ryan Mitchell requested, but now she wished she had never left her desk on the 42nd floor. "Come on, Ryan, you can't be serious about bringing your little assistant to the charity gala," came the voice of Brandon Hayes, heir to a hotel empire. "She's so plain and boring. She probably shops at discount stores and has never seen the inside of a real restaurant." Zara's hand trembled as she gripped the folder containing the reports. Through the crack in the door, she could see her boss Ryan Mitchell leaning back in his leather chair, his perfectly styled dark hair catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He was surrounded by his usual circle of wealthy friends who treated his office like their personal clubhouse. "I mean, what would she even wear?" laughed Chelsea Blackwood, the daughter of a media mogul who had been trying to get Ryan's attention for months. "Does she even own a dress that costs more than $50? The photographers would have a field day. Poor little assistant trying to play dress-up with the elite." Ryan's blue eyes sparkled with cruel amusement as he looked around at his friends. "You know what? You're right. It would be absolutely hilarious to see her try to fit in with our crowd. Can you imagine her face when she realizes she doesn't belong?" "Do it," urged Tyler Constantine, whose family owned half the city's real estate. "Invite her as your date. It'll be the joke of the century. We can all watch her stumble around in cheap shoes, probably spilling wine on herself." Ryan stood up, adjusting his expensive suit jacket. "Fine. I'll invite Zara Washington to be my date to the most exclusive charity event of the year. But we all know how this will end. She'll probably make some excuse about being sick or having to wash her hair. And if she actually shows up?" Chelsea asked, her voice dripping with anticipation. "Then we'll all get the entertainment of watching her realize she's completely out of her league," Ryan replied, his voice cold and calculating. "It'll teach her to know her place." The group erupted in laughter again, and Zara felt her face burn with humiliation. She had worked for Ryan Mitchell for 2 years, putting in 12-hour days, handling his schedule, managing his business affairs, and making his life easier in countless ways. She had always been professional, efficient, and respectful. She had even convinced herself that despite his arrogant exterior, there might be a decent person underneath. But now she knew the truth. To Ryan Mitchell and his wealthy friends, she was nothing more than a source of amusement, a poor girl from the wrong side of town who dared to work in their shining tower of privilege. "Should we bet on whether she'll actually show up?" Brandon asked, pulling out his phone. "I've got $1,000 that says she makes an excuse." "Make it 5,000, Chelsea chimed in. "There's no way she has the guts to walk into that ballroom. She knows she doesn't belong with people like us." Zara's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. She wanted to run back to her desk, grab her purse, and never return to this building again. She wanted to disappear and never have to face the humiliation of seeing these people again. But something deep inside her, a stubborn pride she inherited from her grandmother who cleaned houses to put food on the table, made her stand straighter. She knocked on the door. "Come in," Ryan called out, his voice returning to its usual professional tone. Zara entered the room, keeping her expression neutral despite the fire burning in her chest. She was wearing her usual work outfit, a simple navy blue blouse and black skirt, her natural hair pulled back in a neat bun, minimal makeup highlighting her warm brown skin. She knew she wasn't glamorous like the women in this room, but she also knew she was intelligent, hardworking, and worthy of respect. "The quarterly reports you requested, Mr. Mitchell," she said quietly, placing the folder on his desk. Her voice was steady, giving no indication that she had heard their cruel conversation. Ryan looked at her with those calculating blue eyes, and she could see the wheels turning in his head. "Actually, Zara, I have something to ask you." The room fell silent. Chelsea, Brandon, and Tyler all leaned forward slightly, barely containing their excitement for the show that was about to begin. "The Henderson Foundation Charity Gala is this Saturday night," Ryan continued, his tone casual as if he were discussing the weather. "It's a very important event for the company's image. I need a date and I was wondering if you would accompany me." Zara felt the blood drain from her face. She looked around the room at the smirking faces of Ryan's friends, then back at him. She knew this was a setup, a cruel joke designed to humiliate her. Every instinct told her to decline politely and maintain what was left of her dignity. But then she thought about her mother, lying in a hospital bed fighting cancer, telling her to never let anyone make her feel small. She thought about her grandmother's words, "Baby, you're just as good as anybody else in this world. Don't you ever forget that." "I would be honored to attend with you, Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice clear and strong. What time should I be ready? The surprise on Ryan's face was quickly replaced by that cruel smile. The car will pick you up at 7. It's black tie, of course. Very formal, very exclusive. The guest list includes senators, movie stars, and the wealthiest families in the country. I understand, Zara replied calmly. Is there anything else you need from me today? No, that's all. You can go. Zara nodded and turned to leave, feeling their eyes on her back as she walked out of the room. The moment the door closed behind her, she heard the explosion of laughter and excited chatter. Oh my God, she actually said yes. This is going to be incredible. I can't wait to see what she shows up wearing. Zara walked back to her desk on shaking legs, her mind reeling from what had just happened. She sat down in her chair and stared at her computer screen, the numbers and letters blurring together as tears threatened to fall. She had just agreed to attend the most exclusive social event of the year with a man who saw her as nothing more than entertainment for his cruel friends. She had 3 days to figure out how to walk into a room full of millionaires and billionaires without completely humiliating herself. But even as fear and doubt crept into her mind, that stubborn pride burned brighter. Ryan Mitchell and his friends expected her to fail, expected her to prove that she didn't belong in their world. They were counting on her to be the joke they could laugh about for months to come. Well, Zara Washington had news for them. She might not have been born with a silver spoon in her mouth, but she was smart, she was strong, and she was about to show them exactly what they had underestimated. The game was on, and they had no idea what was coming. Zara's hands shook as she unlocked the door to her small apartment in Brooklyn. The 20-minute subway ride from Manhattan had given her time to think, and now the full weight of what she had agreed to was crashing down on her like a tidal wave. She dropped her purse on the second-hand couch and sank into the cushions, finally allowing the tears she had been holding back to fall. The humiliation burned in her chest like acid. For 2 years she had maintained a professional relationship with Ryan Mitchell, handling his demanding schedule, managing his business correspondence, and dealing with his moods with patience and efficiency. She had even developed a small crush on him, despite his arrogant exterior. There were moments when she caught glimpses of something deeper, when he worked late into the night on a project he was passionate about, or when he quietly donated money to causes he cared about without seeking publicity. She had convinced herself that maybe, just maybe, there was a good man hidden beneath all that wealth and privilege. How wrong she had been. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Lily. How was work today? You seem stressed this morning. Zara stared at the message for a long moment before calling her friend. Lily answered on the first ring. Girl, what's wrong? You sound terrible. Lily, I need to tell you something, and you're going to think I've lost my mind. Zara took a deep breath and explained everything that had happened, from overhearing the cruel conversation to accepting Ryan's invitation. There was silence on the other end of the line for several seconds. Zara Washington, please tell me you did not just agree to go to some fancy party with that man after hearing him talk about you like that. I know how it sounds, but nothing. Baby, that man just showed you exactly who he is. Why would you put yourself through that kind of humiliation? Zara wiped her eyes and stood up, pacing her small living room. Because I'm tired of people like him thinking they can treat people like me as entertainment. I'm tired of being invisible, of being seen as less than human because I don't have money. So what are you going to do? Show up in your work clothes and prove their point? No. Zara's voice grew stronger. I'm going to show up looking absolutely incredible, and I'm going to hold my head high while I do it. I'm going to prove that I belong anywhere I choose to be. Lily sighed. Okay, I hear you. But honey, do you have any idea how much it costs to look rich? We're talking thousands of dollars for a dress, shoes, jewelry, hair, makeup. I have some money saved up. Zara walked to her bedroom and pulled out a small metal box from under her bed. Inside was the emergency fund she had been building for the past 3 years, money she had planned to use for her mother's medical bills or unexpected expenses. I've got about $1,500. That's not enough for. Then I'll figure out how to make it enough. Zara's determination was growing stronger by the minute. Lily, I need your help. You work in fashion. You know about this stuff. Help me transform myself into someone who belongs in that world, even if it's just for one night. Another long pause. You're really serious about this? Dead serious. Okay. Lily's voice took on a business-like tone. But we're going to do this right. No half measures. If you're going to walk into that party, you're going to look like you own the place. Meet me tomorrow after work. We're going shopping and I'm calling in some favors. After hanging up, Zara sat on her bed and looked around her modest apartment. The furniture was mostly second-hand, but she had made it warm and comfortable with colorful throw pillows and plants that thrived in the limited sunlight. Pictures of her family covered one wall, her mother in her nurse's uniform, her grandmother in her Sunday best, cousins and aunts who had all worked hard to build better lives for their children. She thought about her mother, currently undergoing chemotherapy at Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. Carmen Washington had worked double shifts as a nurse for 30 years, putting herself through school while raising Zara alone. She had never complained, never made Zara feel like a burden, and always emphasized the importance of education and hard work. "Success isn't about the money you make," her mother always said. "It's about the respect you earn and the difference you make in the world." But respect was exactly what Zara felt she was fighting for now. She was tired of being overlooked, dismissed, and treated as if her worth was determined by her bank account. She opened her laptop and began researching the Henderson Foundation Charity Gala. The photos from previous years showed exactly what she was up against: women in designer gowns that cost more than Zara made in 6 months, dripping with jewelry, their hair and makeup done by teams of professionals. But as she scrolled through the images, she noticed something else. For all their wealth and beauty, many of these women looked oddly similar: the same straight hair, the same pale skin, the same practiced smiles. They looked like they were playing a part, wearing a costume of wealth and privilege. Maybe that's exactly what she needed to do. Maybe the secret wasn't to try to become one of them, but to play the role so well that they would never suspect she was anything but their equal. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed her mother's number. "Hi, Mom. How are you feeling today?" "Better, baby. The new medication is helping with the nausea." "How was work?" Zara hesitated. Her mother was dealing with enough stress without worrying about her daughter's problems. "It was interesting. I might have a special event to attend this weekend." "Oh? What kind of event?" "A charity gala. For work." "That sounds wonderful. You work so hard, it's nice that they're including you in something special." If only her mother knew how special this invitation really was. "Mom, do you remember what Grandma used to say about holding your head high?" Carmen's voice softened. "She used to say that no one could make you feel inferior without your permission." "Why are you asking, baby?" "Just thinking about her lately." "I love you, Mom. Get some rest." After hanging up, Zara made a decision. She was going to attend that gala, and she was going to do more than just show up. She was going to prove that worth had nothing to do with the circumstances of your birth and everything to do with the content of your character. She opened a notebook and began making lists: what she would need, how much it would cost, and most importantly, how she would conduct herself once she walked into that ballroom. This wasn't just about a dress and makeup. This was about preparing for the performance of her life. She had 3 days to transform herself from Ryan Mitchell's overlooked assistant into a woman who could command respect in any room. It seemed impossible, but as her grandmother used to say, impossible is just another word for something nobody's tried hard enough to do yet. The game had begun, and Zara Washington was playing to win. Ryan Mitchell stood in his penthouse apartment, staring out at the Manhattan skyline as the sun set behind the towering buildings. The city looked beautiful from up here, all glittering lights and endless possibilities. But tonight, the view that usually brought him peace only reminded him of how isolated he felt, suspended above the world in his tower of glass and steel. He loosened his tie and poured himself a glass of expensive whiskey, the same brand his father had preferred. The apartment was a monument to success: original artwork on the walls, furniture that cost more than most people's cars, and technology that could run a small country. But for all its luxury, it felt cold and empty, like a museum exhibit titled, "How the Rich Live." His phone buzzed with messages from his friends, all excited about Saturday's entertainment. Brandon had already started a group chat called Assistant Watch 2025, where they were placing bets on everything from what Zara would wear to whether she would actually show up. "This is going to be legendary," Tyler had written. "I'm bringing my photographer friend to capture the moment when she realizes she's in over her head. Just make sure you get pictures of her face when she sees the other women there," Chelsea had added. "This is going to be so much fun." Ryan set his phone down without responding. When he had made the invitation, surrounded by his friends' laughter and expectations, it had seemed like harmless fun. Zara was just his assistant after all. She was part of the background of his life, efficient and invisible, like the expensive coffee machine in his office or the luxury car service that drove him around the city. But now, alone in his apartment, he was starting to feel something he rarely experienced: doubt. He walked to his home office and pulled out Zara's employment file. Her resume was impressive: a degree in business administration from City College, where she had graduated summa cum laude while working part-time to pay for school. Her references from previous jobs all praised her intelligence, reliability, and professionalism. She had been Employee of the Month 3 times in her first year at Mitchell Technologies. Ryan realized he knew almost nothing about her personal life. In 2 years of working together, their conversations had been strictly professional. He knew she was punctual, thorough, and never complained about his demanding schedule or difficult requests. She had handled hostile clients, impossible deadlines, and his own bad moods with grace and efficiency. But he didn't know where she lived, what she did on weekends, or what dreams she might have beyond organizing his calendar and managing his correspondence. The memory of her face when he had made the invitation came back to him now. For just a moment before she had composed herself, he had seen something in her eyes that looked like hurt. It had been quickly replaced by the professional mask she always wore, but now he wondered if he had imagined that flash of pain. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Mitchell? Your dinner has arrived." "Thank you, Marcus. Just leave it in the kitchen." Marcus had been Ryan's doorman and building manager for 5 years. He was a man in his 60s who had immigrated from Jamaica and worked multiple jobs to support his family. Ryan had always been polite to him, but they had never had a real conversation beyond pleasantries about the weather or building maintenance. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" The older man paused, clearly surprised by the unusual request. "Of course, Mr. Mitchell. If someone invited you to an event knowing you might not fit in, would you go anyway?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Well, sir, I suppose it would depend on why they invited me. If they were trying to help me or include me in something good, I might be grateful. But if they were inviting me to make fun of me," he shrugged, "I'd probably still go, but I'd make sure I held my head high while I was there. Even if you knew people would be watching you, waiting for you to fail? Especially then, sir. Sometimes the best way to handle people who underestimate you is to prove them wrong." After Marcus left, Ryan found himself thinking about the conversation. He tried to remember the last time he had genuinely connected with another person, had a real conversation about something that mattered. His friends were entertaining, but their relationships were built on shared privilege and mutual benefit. His romantic relationships had been similarly superficial, beautiful women who were more interested in his bank account than his personality. He thought about his parents who had died in a car accident when he was 25, leaving him the sole heir to a technology empire worth billions. His father had been a brilliant businessman but emotionally distant, always focused on the next deal or acquisition. His mother had been kind but overwhelmed by the demands of high society, constantly worried about appearances and social status. Ryan had inherited their wealth and their world, but he had never learned how to form genuine connections with people. His success in business came from his intelligence and ruthless efficiency, but his personal life was a series of shallow relationships and meaningless encounters. He walked to his bedroom and opened the closet where his formal wear hung in perfect order. Dozens of expensive suits and tuxedos, each one tailored to perfection, each one a costume for playing the role of the successful billionaire. He had been playing that role for so long that he sometimes forgot who he really was underneath all the wealth and status. The truth was, he was lonely. Despite being surrounded by people who wanted his attention, his money, or his influence, he couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at him and seen just Ryan, not Ryan Mitchell the billionaire. Maybe that's why he had agreed to his friend's cruel suggestion. Maybe he was so used to being seen as a symbol of wealth and power that he had forgotten how to treat others as real people with real feelings. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was his business partner and oldest friend, Alex Chin. "Hey, I heard about your gala date from Brandon. Are you really going through with this?" "It's just a harmless joke, Alex. She probably won't even show up." "Ryan, I've met your assistant a few times. She seems like a nice person. Are you sure this is the kind of thing you want to be known for?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're already getting a reputation for being cold and ruthless in business. Do you really want to add cruel to employees to that list?" Ryan was quiet for a moment. Alex was one of the few people who ever questioned his decisions or challenged his behavior. It was one of the reasons their friendship had lasted since college. "Maybe you're right," Ryan said finally. "Maybe I should call it off. Or maybe you should actually try to show her a good time. When's the last time you went to one of these events with someone who wasn't trying to impress you or use you for something?" After hanging up, Ryan sat in his leather chair and thought about Alex's words. When was the last time he had been with someone who didn't want something from him? Someone who saw him as a person rather than a walking bank account? He thought about Zara again, remembering the way she handled difficult situations at work with calm professionalism. She never asked for favors, never tried to leverage their working relationship for personal gain, and never seemed impressed by his wealth or status. In fact, she was one of the few people in his life who treated him like a normal person. Maybe that's why his friends found the idea of her as his date so amusing. She was real in a way that most people in his social circle weren't. She worked hard for everything she had, and she didn't pretend to be something she wasn't. But it was too late to change his mind now. The invitation had been made, and she had accepted. His friends were expecting a show, and backing out now would only make things worse for both of them. All he could do was hope that somehow, this wouldn't turn into the disaster everyone was expecting. As he prepared for bed, Ryan made a decision. Whatever happened at the gala, he would try to be a gentleman. He would make sure Zara was treated with respect, and he would do his best to ensure she had a good time, even if his original motivation had been less than honorable. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Zara stood in front of the mirror in the small Brooklyn boutique, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The transformation had taken 3 days of intensive preparation, and the results were beyond anything she had imagined possible. "Girl, I am about to cry," Lily said, her voice thick with emotion. "You look absolutely stunning." The dress was a masterpiece of deep emerald green silk that hugged Zara's curves perfectly before flowing into an elegant train. Lily had found it at a consignment shop in the Upper East Side, a designer gown that had been worn once by a socialite who had donated it for tax purposes. The color brought out the warm golden undertones in Zara's brown skin and made her dark eyes sparkle like jewels. "Are you sure about the shoes?" Zara asked, wobbling slightly in the 4-inch heels that added dramatic height to her frame. "Trust me, walking in heels is like riding a bike. Once you get the rhythm, you'll glide across that floor like you were born to wear them." Lily knelt down to adjust the straps. "Remember what we practiced? Small steps, weight on your toes, and keep your core engaged." The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of preparation that had exhausted Zara's savings but transformed her confidence. Lily had called in favors from her contacts in the fashion industry, finding a talented hairstylist who specialized in natural hair textures. They had decided to embrace Zara's natural curls rather than trying to straighten them, creating an elegant updo that showcased her graceful neck and delicate features. The makeup had been another revelation. Instead of trying to hide her natural beauty, the artist had enhanced it, using rich colors that complemented her skin tone and dramatic techniques that made her eyes appear larger and more expressive. The result was sophisticated and striking without being overdone. "Now let's practice the walk one more time," Lily said, pulling out her phone to record. "Remember, you're not just wearing the dress, you're owning it." Zara took a deep breath and began walking across the small boutique, focusing on the posture lessons they had practiced. Shoulders back, chin up, small confident steps that made the silk dress flow around her legs like water. She had spent hours the night before practicing in her apartment, learning to move gracefully in the heels and elegant dress. "Perfect." Lily clapped her hands. "Now let's go over the conversation topics we discussed." They had spent Tuesday evening researching the charity being honored at the gala, current events that might come up in conversation, and basic etiquette for formal events. Zara had always been well-read and intelligent, but she wanted to be prepared for any topic that might arise. The Henderson Foundation focuses on education initiatives for underprivileged children, Zara recited. They've funded over 200 schools in low-income areas and provided scholarships for thousands of students. Good. And if someone asks about your background, I'm pursuing my MBA in business administration while working in the corporate sector. I'm passionate about educational equity and social justice initiatives. It was all true even if it wasn't the whole truth. Lily nodded approvingly. You don't have to lie about who you are, but you don't have to give them your entire life story either. Let them make assumptions and just be yourself, intelligent, articulate, and confident. The jewelry had been the final challenge. Lily had borrowed pieces from a friend who worked at a high-end jewelry store, elegant diamond earrings and a delicate necklace that caught the light beautifully without being ostentatious. Remember, less is more when it comes to accessories, Lily had explained. You want to look wealthy, not like you're trying too hard to look wealthy. On Wednesday they had tackled the practical aspects of the evening. Zara had purchased a small clutch purse that matched her shoes and practiced the art of carrying it gracefully while walking and dancing. They had researched the venue, studied photos of previous galas, and even watched YouTube videos about formal dining etiquette. If you're not sure which fork to use, just watch what everyone else is doing, Lily had advised. And if someone tries to make you feel uncomfortable, kill them with kindness. The more gracious and poised you are, the worse they'll look. Now, standing in front of the mirror on Friday evening, Zara felt like she was looking at a completely different person. The woman in the reflection was elegant, sophisticated, and confident, someone who belonged in ballrooms and boardrooms, someone who commanded respect and attention. But underneath the transformation, she was still the same person who had grown up in a small apartment with her mother, who had worked her way through college, who had earned every opportunity through hard work and determination. The dress and makeup were just the costume for the role she was about to play. "I'm scared," she admitted to Lily. "What if I make a fool of myself? What if everyone can tell I don't belong there?" Lily took her hands. "Listen to me, Zara Washington. You belong anywhere you choose to be. You're intelligent, kind, hardworking, and beautiful inside and out. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. But what if Ryan's friends are as cruel as they sounded in his office? Then you'll handle them with the same grace and strength you've shown in every other challenge in your life. And if they can't see how amazing you are, that's their loss, not yours." Zara looked at herself in the mirror one more time, taking in the transformation. Tomorrow night, she would walk into one of the most exclusive events in the city on the arm of a billionaire who had invited her as a joke. She would be surrounded by people who had more money than she could imagine, wearing clothes that cost more than her annual salary. But she wouldn't be going as Ryan Mitchell's amusing assistant. She would be going as herself, a woman who had earned her place in the world through intelligence, hard work, and determination. A woman who refused to be anyone's entertainment or punchline. "I'm ready," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "You're more than ready," Lily replied. "You're going to show them what they've been missing." As they carefully packed the dress and accessories for tomorrow's event, Zara felt a mixture of excitement and terror. She had no idea what the evening would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. She was going to face it with dignity, grace, and the unshakable knowledge that she was worthy of respect. The joke was about to be on Ryan Mitchell and his friends, because they had seriously underestimated Zara Washington. The black limousine pulled up to the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel at exactly 7:30, 15 minutes after the scheduled arrival time. Zara had learned from her research that fashionably late was an art form among the wealthy, and she wanted to make an entrance that would be remembered. Inside the car, she took one final look at herself in the small mirror, her hands steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. The emerald green dress looked even more stunning in the evening light, and her hair and makeup had held up perfectly during the ride from Brooklyn. "You got this, girl," she whispered to herself, repeating the affirmation Lily had taught her. "You belong here." The driver opened her door, and Zara stepped out onto the red carpet that led to the hotel entrance. The cool evening air felt refreshing against her skin, and she took a moment to appreciate the grandeur of the scene before her. Photographers lined the walkway, capturing images of the wealthy and famous as they arrived for the charity gala. She had expected to feel intimidated by the spectacle, but instead she felt a strange sense of calm. All the preparation had been worth it. She looked and felt like she belonged in this world, at least for tonight. The doorman, resplendent in his formal uniform, opened the heavy glass doors for her with a respectful nod. "Good evening, miss. Welcome to the plaza." "Thank you," Zara replied with a gracious smile, her voice carrying the confidence she had been practicing. The lobby was a vision of marble and crystal, filled with elegantly dressed people holding champagne glasses and engaging in animated conversation. Zara recognized several faces from magazines and television, actors, politicians, and business leaders all mingling together in the exclusive atmosphere. She made her way to the ballroom entrance, where a reception line had formed. A woman with a clipboard and a headset was checking names against a guest list. "Good evening, I'm here with the Mitchell party," Zara said smoothly. The woman scanned her list and smiled. "Of course, Miss Washington. Mr. Mitchell is already inside. Please go right in." Zara thanked her and took a deep breath before walking through the ornate doors into the ballroom. The sight that greeted her was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over hundreds of guests, while an orchestra played softly in one corner. The walls were draped in elegant fabric, and centerpieces of white roses and gold accents adorned every table. But it wasn't the opulent decorations that made her pause. It was the sudden hush that fell over the nearest section of the room as she entered. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Eyes widened with surprise and admiration. For a moment, Zara felt like she was moving in slow motion as she walked deeper into the ballroom, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She spotted Ryan immediately. He was standing near the bar with his usual group of friends, wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that emphasized his tall frame and broad shoulders. His dark hair was styled immaculately, and even from across the room, She could see those piercing blue eyes that had looked at her with such cold calculation just 3 days ago. But now those same eyes were wide with shock. Ryan's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips as he stared at her. His mouth actually fell open slightly, and Zara had to suppress a smile of satisfaction. Brandon, Tyler, and Chelsea were equally stunned, their faces showing a mixture of disbelief and something that looked suspiciously like panic. Zara began walking toward them, her movements graceful and confident. She had practiced this walk 100 times in her apartment, but now, with all eyes on her, it felt natural and effortless. The emerald silk flowed around her legs like liquid poetry, and the soft lighting made her skin glow with an inner radiance. "My God, who is that?" she heard someone whisper as she passed. "She's absolutely stunning," came another voice. "I've never seen her at one of these events before." More heads turned as she continued across the room. Men straightened their ties and smoothed their hair, while women studied her dress and jewelry with expressions of curiosity and envy. Zara kept her chin up and her shoulders back, channeling every lesson Lily had taught her about confidence and poise. She was 20 feet away from Ryan's group when she saw Chelsea grab his arm and whisper urgently in his ear. Whatever she said made Ryan snap out of his trance, and he quickly set down his champagne glass before walking toward Zara. They met in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by curious onlookers but speaking in voices only they could hear. "Zara?" Ryan's voice was barely above a whisper, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "Is that really you?" "Good evening, Ryan," she replied, her tone polite but distant. "Thank you for inviting me tonight. This is quite an impressive event." He stood there for another moment, just staring at her. Up close she could see the confusion and something else. Was it guilt? In his expression. "You look..." He started, then stopped, shaking his head. "I mean, you're absolutely beautiful. I barely recognized you." "Well, you did say it was formal," Zara replied with a slight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I wanted to make sure I dressed appropriately for the occasion." The music changed to a slower waltz, and couples began moving onto the dance floor. Ryan seemed to gather himself and extended his arm to her. "Would you like to dance?" Zara considered refusing. Part of her wanted to maintain her distance and make him work for her forgiveness. But she had come here with a purpose, and that purpose required her to play the part of his date for the evening. "I'd be delighted," she said, placing her hand on his arm. As they walked onto the dance floor, Zara was acutely aware of the whispers and stares following them. She could see Ryan's friends watching from the bar, their expressions no longer amused but worried. Chelsea in particular looked like she had swallowed something bitter. Ryan placed one hand on Zara's waist and took her other hand in his, pulling her into the traditional waltz position. She had watched YouTube videos to learn the basic steps, but she had never actually danced with a partner before. "Just follow my lead," Ryan said softly, seeming to sense her nervousness. The first few steps were tentative, but Zara quickly found the rhythm. Ryan was an excellent dancer, smooth and confident, and he guided her across the floor with ease. After a few moments, she began to relax and enjoy the experience. "You dance beautifully," he said, his voice warmer than she had expected. "Thank you. You're not bad yourself." They danced in comfortable silence for a while, moving together as if they had been partners for years. Zara found herself getting lost in the music and the moment, almost forgetting the circumstances that had brought them together. But then she caught sight of Chelsea's furious expression and remembered exactly why she was here. "Your friends seem surprised to see me," she said, her voice carefully neutral. Ryan's jaw tightened slightly. "They're not used to seeing someone as elegant as you at these events." It was a diplomatic answer, but Zara knew better. She had heard their cruel laughter and their betting on her failure. She knew they had expected her to either not show up at all or to arrive looking awkward and out of place. Instead, she had walked into their exclusive world looking like she belonged there, and it had clearly thrown them off balance. "Well," she said, her smile becoming more genuine, "I'm glad I could exceed their expectations." As the song ended, Ryan led her off the dance floor toward his group of friends. Zara steeled herself for whatever cruel comments or backhanded compliments they might have prepared. But as they approached, she noticed something interesting. Brandon, Tyler, and Chelsea all looked genuinely nervous, as if they weren't quite sure how to handle this turn of events. "Everyone," Ryan said, his voice carrying a note of pride that surprised Zara, "I'd like you to properly meet Zara Washington." Brandon stepped forward first, his usual smirk replaced by a more respectful expression. "Zara, you look absolutely stunning tonight. I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Brandon Hayes." "It's nice to meet you, Brandon," Zara replied graciously, shaking his extended hand. Tyler and Chelsea followed suit, both offering polite but strained greetings. Zara could see the confusion in their eyes. This wasn't the entertainment they had been expecting. Instead of a woman they could mock and dismiss, they were faced with someone who clearly belonged in their world, at least for tonight. "So, Zara," Chelsea said, her voice artificially sweet, "Ryan tells us you work together. What exactly do you do?" It was a loaded question, clearly designed to expose her as just an assistant. But Zara was ready for it. "I work in corporate administration and business development," she replied smoothly. "It's challenging work, but I find it rewarding to help build successful enterprises." Technically true and vague enough to let them draw their own conclusions. "How interesting," Chelsea said, her smile becoming more forced. "And where did you get that gorgeous dress? It looks like something from Milan." Another trap, but Zara navigated it expertly. "Thank you, I'm glad you like it. I believe good style is more about how you carry yourself than about labels, don't you?" Before Chelsea could respond, a distinguished older gentleman approached their group. Zara recognized him from her research as Senator Hamilton, one of the most influential politicians in the state. "Ryan, good to see you," the senator said, shaking hands. "And who is this lovely young woman?" "Senator Hamilton, I'd like you to meet Zara Washington," Ryan said. "Zara, this is Senator Hamilton, one of the sponsors of tonight's event." "It's an honor to meet you, Senator," Zara said, offering her hand. "I've followed your work on education reform with great interest." The senator's eyebrows rose with surprise and pleasure. "You're familiar with my education initiatives?" "Of course. Your bill to increase funding for early childhood education programs in low-income areas is exactly the kind of forward-thinking policy we need. The research clearly shows that investment in early education provides the highest return in terms of reducing inequality and improving economic outcomes." Zara had done her homework and it showed. The senator's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm as he launched into a detailed discussion of his legislative priorities. Within minutes, they were engaged in a sophisticated conversation about policy and social justice that left Ryan's friends standing awkwardly on the sidelines. As the evening progressed, Zara found herself moving through the room with increasing confidence. She spoke knowledgeably with business leaders about market trends, discussed art with collectors, and charmed politicians with her insights into social issues. Every conversation reinforced the image she had carefully crafted, that of an intelligent, articulate woman who belonged in these circles. Ryan stayed by her side throughout the evening, and she began to notice a change in his behavior. The arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine admiration. He watched her handle each social interaction with growing respect, and when he introduced her to other guests, there was pride in his voice. But the real test came when dinner was announced, and they took their seats at one of the premium tables near the front of the ballroom. Zara found herself seated between Ryan and a prominent venture capitalist, facing directly across from Chelsea, who had clearly maneuvered to get the seat where she could observe Zara's every move. As the first course was served, Zara silently thanked Lily for all those etiquette lessons. She knew exactly which fork to use, how to make polite conversation while eating, and how to handle the formal dining experience with grace. But she also knew that the real challenge was just beginning. Dinner conversation at events like this could be treacherous, full of subtle social tests and opportunities for embarrassment. Chelsea was clearly planning something, and Zara could see the calculation in her eyes as she prepared to make her move. The game was far from over. As the salad course was served, Chelsea leaned forward with that artificial smile that Zara was beginning to recognize as a warning sign. "So, Zara," Chelsea said, her voice carrying just loud enough for the entire table to hear, "Ryan mentioned you're quite the reader. What books have you enjoyed lately?" It seemed like an innocent question, but Zara could sense the trap. Chelsea was probably expecting her to mention popular romance novels or bestsellers, something that would mark her as unsophisticated compared to the literary preferences of the wealthy elite. "I just finished rereading The Souls of Black Folk, by W.E.B. Du Bois," Zara replied thoughtfully. His analysis of double consciousness feels particularly relevant to current discussions about identity and belonging in professional spaces. "I'm also working through Piketty's research on economic inequality, though I find his conclusions about capital concentration a bit pessimistic." The venture capitalist beside her, David Morrison, nearly choked on his wine. "You're familiar with Piketty's work? Most people find his economic theory rather dense." "It is complex, but the implications are fascinating," Zara said, turning to engage him in conversation. His data on wealth concentration over the past century raises important questions about social mobility and the sustainability of current economic models. Within minutes, she was engaged in a sophisticated discussion with David and two other business leaders at the table about economic policy, social responsibility, and the role of private enterprise in addressing inequality. Her responses were thoughtful and well-informed, drawing on everything from classical economic theory to current research. Ryan listened with growing amazement. In 2 years of working together, he had never heard Zara speak with such passion and intelligence about subjects beyond their immediate work responsibilities. He was seeing a completely different side of her, and it was captivating. Chelsea's plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of exposing Zara as out of her depth, the conversation had established her as one of the most interesting people at the table. "Zara, you should meet my daughter," said Patricia Whitman, the wife of a prominent banker. "She's studying social policy at Harvard, and I think you two would have fascinating conversations." "I'd love that," Zara replied warmly. "What's her focus area?" As the conversation continued, Ryan found himself studying Zara's profile as she spoke. The elegant curve of her neck, the way her eyes lit up when she discussed something she was passionate about, the graceful gestures she made with her hands, everything about her seemed to glow in the soft ballroom lighting. He realized with a start that he was attracted to her. Not just physically, though she looked absolutely stunning tonight, but intellectually and emotionally. She was brilliant, compassionate, and genuine in a way that was rare in his social circle. The thought disturbed him. This was supposed to be a joke, an evening of entertainment at her expense. But nothing about this evening was going according to plan. "Ryan." Zara's voice brought him back to the present. "Patricia was asking about your foundation's education initiatives." "Oh yes," Ryan said, trying to refocus on the conversation. "We've been working with several schools in underprivileged areas, providing technology and funding for STEM programs." "That's wonderful," Zara said, and her smile seemed genuinely pleased. Education technology can be such a powerful equalizer when implemented thoughtfully. The main course arrived and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. But Ryan noticed that other people at nearby tables kept glancing over at Zara, clearly intrigued by the beautiful, articulate woman they had never seen before at these events. Several men had approached during cocktails to introduce themselves, and Ryan had felt an unexpected surge of possessiveness. He found himself staying closer to her side, his hand on her back as they moved through the crowd, subtly signaling that she was with him. "You're full of surprises tonight," he said quietly during a lull in the conversation. "Am I?" Zara asked, her tone carefully neutral. "I had no idea you were so well-read, so passionate about social issues. In all the time we've worked together, you've never mentioned any of this." Zara turned to look at him directly, her dark eyes steady and unreadable. "You never asked." The simple statement hit him like a physical blow. She was right, of course. In 2 years of working together, he had never once asked about her interests, her goals, her thoughts on anything beyond their immediate work tasks. He had treated her like a highly efficient machine rather than a person with her own mind and dreams. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You're right. I should have." "Excuse me, folks." The conversation was interrupted by the evening's master of ceremonies taking the stage. "If I could have your attention, please. It's time for our charity auction, and we have some truly spectacular items up for bid tonight." The auction was one of the highlights of these events, where wealthy attendees competed to donate large sums of money for prestigious items and experiences. Ryan usually enjoyed the competition, the way bidding wars could escalate into six-figure donations for charity. But tonight, he found himself more interested in watching Zara's reactions to the proceedings. Her eyes widened with amazement when a weekend at a private island resort sold for $50,000, and she looked genuinely moved when a young scholarship recipient took the stage to speak about how the Henderson Foundation had changed her life. "That could have been me," Zara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Without programs like this, I never would have been able to afford college." Ryan looked at her with new understanding. The passion she had shown earlier when discussing education policy wasn't academic, it was personal. She had lived the experiences they were raising money to address. The next item up for auction was a private cooking class with a celebrity chef, and bidding quickly escalated. Ryan noticed several men at nearby tables glancing at Zara before raising their paddles, and he realized they were hoping to impress her with their generous donations. The idea of other men trying to win her attention triggered something competitive in Ryan. When the bidding reached $20,000, he raised his paddle. "$25,000, he called out. Zara looked at him with surprise. "Ryan, you don't have to." "$30,000, came a voice from across the room. Ryan looked over to see Marcus Webb, a real estate developer who had been eyeing Zara all evening. 40,000, Ryan countered, his voice carrying a note of challenge. The room was beginning to take notice of the bidding war. Zara placed her hand on Ryan's arm. This is too much. It's just a cooking class. But Ryan was no longer thinking about the cooking class. He was thinking about the way Marcus had looked at Zara when they were introduced, the way he had lingered just a bit too long when shaking her hand. 50,000, Marcus called out with a confident smile. Ryan raised his paddle again. 75,000. A murmur went through the crowd. This was becoming one of the largest single donations of the evening, and everyone was watching to see how high it would go. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then shook his head with a rueful smile. Congratulations, Ryan. That's quite a generous donation. The auctioneer brought down his gavel. Sold to Mr. Mitchell for $75,000. The applause was enthusiastic and Ryan felt a surge of satisfaction. But when he looked at Zara, her expression was unreadable. That was very generous of you, she said quietly. It's for a good cause, he replied, though they both knew his motivation had been more personal than charitable. As the auction continued, Ryan found himself studying Zara's profile again. The evening had been full of revelations, each one making him see her in a completely different light. She wasn't just his efficient assistant, she was a brilliant, passionate, beautiful woman who had somehow been invisible to him for 2 years. But there was something else bothering him, something that had been growing stronger throughout the evening. It was the memory of the conversation in his office, of the cruel laughter and the betting pool his friends had started. It was the knowledge that this entire evening had begun as a joke designed to humiliate her. And judging by the way she had handled every challenge with grace and intelligence, he was beginning to suspect that she knew exactly what his original intentions had been. The question was, what was she planning to do about it? As the auction concluded and the orchestra resumed playing, couples began returning to the dance floor. The evening was reaching its peak, with champagne flowing and animated conversations filling the elegant ballroom. But Ryan found himself growing increasingly uncomfortable with the weight of his guilty conscience. Would you like to get some air? He asked Zara quietly. There's a terrace overlooking the park. She nodded, and he led her through the French doors onto a stone balcony decorated with twinkling lights and flowering plants. The night air was cool and refreshing after the warmth of the crowded ballroom, and the sounds of the city provided a gentle backdrop to their conversation. It's beautiful up here, Zara said, moving to the railing and looking out over Central Park. The moonlight caught the silk of her dress and made her skin glow with an ethereal radiance. Zara, I need to tell you something, Ryan began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. She turned to face him, her expression patient but guarded. What is it? About the invitation to tonight. He ran a hand through his hair, disturbing its perfect styling. My reasons for asking you weren't entirely honorable. I know, she said simply. The words hit him like a physical blow. You know? I heard you and your friends talking in your office on Tuesday. I was bringing you the quarterly reports when I overheard your conversation about the entertainment I would provide tonight. Ryan felt the blood drain from his face. Zara, I'm so sorry. I was being cruel and thoughtless and you didn't deserve that. No, I didn't, she agreed, her voice steady but not unkind. The question is, why did you go through with it? And why did you spend $75,000 on a cooking class you don't need? He was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the park while he gathered his thoughts. Honestly? At first it was just supposed to be a joke. My friends were teasing me about not having a date, and inviting you seemed like harmless fun. Harmless to whom? You're right. It was cruel and stupid. He turned to face her directly. But tonight, watching you, talking with you, seeing how brilliant and amazing you are, I realized I've been an idiot for 2 years. I've worked with you every day and never really saw you. Not the real you. Zara studied his face in the moonlight, as if trying to determine whether his words were sincere. And what do you see now? I see someone who's smarter than half the people in that ballroom. Someone who's worked incredibly hard to get where she is. Someone who handles challenges with grace and dignity that I couldn't manage on my best day. He paused, then added quietly, I see someone I'd like to know better if you'll let me. Ryan, she said gently, I appreciate the apology, but you have to understand, this isn't real. This dress, this jewelry, this whole evening, it's a performance. Tomorrow I go back to being your assistant, and you go back to being the boss who sees me as part of the furniture. It doesn't have to be that way. Doesn't it? She moved closer to the railing, her voice becoming more passionate. Do you know what I did to afford this dress? I spent my entire emergency fund, money I've been saving for 3 years in case my mother's medical bills got worse. I borrowed jewelry from a friend's friend and spent 2 days learning to walk in these shoes. Ryan felt a stab of guilt at her words. I didn't know about your mother. Is she ill? She's been fighting cancer for 8 months. She's a nurse, has been her whole life taking care of other people. Now she's the one who needs taking care of, and I'm doing my best to help while working full-time and trying to finish my MBA. The revelation hit Ryan like a punch to the gut. While he had been playing cruel jokes with his wealthy friends, Zara had been dealing with real problems, real challenges that his money and privilege had never forced him to face. Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped, arranged for better doctors, covered the medical expenses. Because that's not your responsibility, she said firmly. And because I've learned that accepting help from employers can be complicated. What happens when you decide I'm not worth helping anymore? What happens when your generosity comes with strings attached? Her words stung because they contained an uncomfortable truth. How many times had he used his wealth and influence to control situations and people? How many of his relationships were built on unequal power dynamics? It wouldn't be like that, he said, though even as he spoke, he wasn't entirely sure he could promise that. Maybe not. But can you understand why I might be cautious? They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the sounds of the party drifting through the open doors behind them. Ryan found himself really looking at Zara for perhaps the first time, seeing past the elegant exterior to the strength and vulnerability underneath. Can I ask you something? He said finally. Of course. Why did you come tonight? After hearing what you heard, why didn't you just tell me you were sick or make some other excuse? Zara was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the stone railing. Because I was tired of being invisible. Tired of being treated like I didn't matter. And maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I could belong in a world like this, even if it was just for one night. You more than belong here, Ryan said earnestly. You've been the most interesting person at this entire event. She turned to look at him, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Is that your professional opinion, Mr. Mitchell? That's my personal opinion, Zara. And I'd like to get to know the person behind the professional facade if you're willing. Before she could respond, the sound of someone clearing their throat interrupted them. They turned to see Chelsea standing in the doorway to the terrace, her expression tight with barely controlled anger. Sorry to interrupt, Chelsea said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, but they're about to announce the final charity totals, and I thought you might want to be inside for that, Ryan. We'll be right in, Ryan replied, clearly annoyed by the interruption. But Chelsea didn't leave. Instead, she stepped onto the terrace and fixed Zara with a calculating stare. You know, Zara, I have to say you've been quite the surprise tonight. When Ryan first told us about you, we expected. She paused dramatically, letting the implications hang in the air. What did you expect, Chelsea? Zara asked, her voice calm but with an edge of steel. Well, someone more appropriate to her station. But you've certainly cleaned up nicely. Though I do have to wonder, is this the real you or just a very good performance? The insult was delivered with a smile, but its intent was clear. Ryan started to step forward, but Zara placed a gentle hand on his arm, stopping him. I think the real question, Zara said, her voice gracious but firm, is whether authenticity is about the clothes you wear or the way you treat other people. Don't you agree? The response was perfect, polite enough to be socially acceptable, but pointed enough to make Chelsea's cruelty obvious to anyone listening. Chelsea's smile faltered slightly, and she seemed to realize she had been outmaneuvered. How philosophical, Chelsea said weakly. Shall we go back inside? Zara suggested, linking her arm through Ryan's. I'd hate to miss the charity announcements. As they walked back into the ballroom, Ryan felt a surge of admiration for the way Zara had handled Chelsea's attack. She had been classy, intelligent, and subtly devastating all at once. But he also felt a growing sense of protectiveness toward her. His friends had invited her into their world only to try to tear her down, and he was beginning to realize that he wouldn't let that happen. The evening was far from over, and he suspected the real challenges were yet to come. The announcement of the charity totals brought enthusiastic applause, with the evening having raised over $2 million for the Henderson Foundation. As the master of ceremonies thanked the generous donors, Ryan and Zara made their way back to their table, where his friends were waiting with expressions that ranged from confused to openly hostile. Well, Brandon said as they approached, his voice carrying a note of forced joviality. The golden couple returns. You two certainly made an impression on the terrace. We were just getting some air, Ryan replied, his tone warning Brandon to be careful. Of course you were, Tyler added with a smirk. Though from what Chelsea tells us, it looked quite romantic out there. Zara maintained her composure, but Ryan could see the tension in her shoulders. The evening had been going so well, and now his friends were determined to create drama. Actually, came a familiar voice from behind them, I think they look perfect together. Everyone turned to see a stunning blonde woman in a silver gown approaching their table. Ryan's face went pale as he recognized his ex-girlfriend, Vanessa Sterling, the daughter of a prominent media family and someone he hadn't seen in over 6 months. Vanessa, he said, his voice carefully neutral. I didn't know you were going to be here tonight. Last-minute decision, she replied with a dazzling smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Daddy thought it would be good for me to be seen supporting worthy causes. Her gaze shifted to Zara, studying her with obvious curiosity. And you must be Ryan's mysterious date. I'm Vanessa Sterling. Zara Washington, Zara replied politely, extending her hand. It's nice to meet you. Likewise, I'm sure. Vanessa's handshake lingered just a moment too long, her eyes never leaving Zara's face. You know, Ryan and I dated for almost 2 years. I thought I knew all of his friends, but I don't remember ever meeting you. The comment was designed to probe, to establish Vanessa's prior claim and put Zara on the defensive. But Zara handled it with the same grace she had shown all evening. Ryan and I know each other through work, she said simply. Sometimes the best relationships develop from shared professional respect. It was a perfect response, honest but vague, and it subtly suggested that their connection was based on something deeper than mere social acquaintance. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. She had expected to fluster this unknown woman, but Zara's poise was clearly throwing her off balance. How lovely, Vanessa said, her tone becoming more pointed. And what kind of work do you do, Zara? Are you in finance like Ryan? Or perhaps fashion? You certainly have exquisite taste. Another probe, this one designed to expose Zara's background and make her feel self-conscious about her social status. Ryan started to intervene, but Zara spoke first. I work in corporate development and strategic planning, she replied smoothly. It's challenging work, but I find it rewarding to help build sustainable business models that create value for all stakeholders. Again, technically true and impressively vague. Vanessa was clearly growing frustrated with her inability to pin Zara down or make her uncomfortable. How fascinating, Vanessa said, her smile becoming more forced. You know, Ryan, you never mentioned working with someone so accomplished. The pause before accomplished was deliberate, designed to suggest that she didn't quite believe Zara's credentials. But before Ryan could respond, the orchestra began playing again, and couples started moving back onto the dance floor. Vanessa, said a distinguished older man approaching their group, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. Oh, hello, Senator Richardson, Vanessa replied, her demeanor instantly shifting to charm a potential political connection. How wonderful to see you again. The senator, however, barely glanced at Vanessa. His attention was focused entirely on Zara. Ms. Washington, I wanted to thank you for that insightful conversation earlier about education policy. Your perspective on implementation challenges was particularly valuable. I'd love to continue that discussion sometime. Perhaps you'd consider joining our advisory committee on education reform. The invitation was clearly genuine and prestigious. Advisory positions on senatorial committees were highly sought after, typically reserved for experts with significant credentials and influence. Zara looked genuinely surprised and pleased. That's very kind of you, Senator. I'd be honored to contribute to such important work. Excellent. I'll have my staff contact you to set up a meeting. He turned to Ryan. You're fortunate to have such a brilliant colleague, Mitchell. Hold on to this one. As the senator walked away, Vanessa's expression had shifted from smug confidence to something approaching panic. This unknown woman wasn't just holding her own in their social circle. She was actively impressing people who mattered. Well, Vanessa said, her voice tight, you certainly made quite an impression on the senator. Though I suppose politicians are always looking for diverse perspectives. The comment was calculated to sting, with its implications about diversity hiring and tokenism. But it also revealed Vanessa's desperation and poor judgment. Ryan's jaw tightened with anger. Vanessa, I think you... It's all right, Ryan, Zara interrupted gently, her hand touching his arm. She turned to face Vanessa directly, her expression calm but her eyes flashing with quiet fire. You know, Vanessa, you're absolutely right about politicians valuing diverse perspectives. In my experience, the most successful leaders surround themselves with people who bring different backgrounds, experiences, and ways of thinking to complex problems. It's one of the reasons democracy works so well. It assumes that wisdom can come from unexpected places. The response was brilliant. It acknowledged Vanessa's insult while reframing it as a compliment, and it did so with such intellectual sophistication that it made Vanessa look small and petty by comparison. Chelsea, who had been watching this exchange with growing alarm, decided to jump in. "Oh, how wonderfully said. Though of course, there's something to be said for traditional qualifications and established social connections. Some circles require a certain breeding, don't you think?" The word breeding hung in the air like a slap. It was a direct attack on Zara's background, designed to make her feel like an outsider who didn't belong. But if Chelsea and Vanessa expected Zara to crumble under their combined assault, they were badly mistaken. "I couldn't agree more about the importance of good breeding," Zara replied with a serene smile. "After all, true breeding is about character, kindness, and how we treat others, especially those who can't do anything for us. My grandmother always said that real class is measured by how gracious we are to people, regardless of their circumstances." The comeback was devastating in its elegance. Without raising her voice or being directly rude, Zara had essentially called both women classless while positioning herself as the more refined person in the conversation. Ryan felt a surge of admiration and something stronger, pride. This brilliant, graceful woman was with him tonight, and she was handling his shallow, cruel friends with more dignity than they deserved. But he could also see that the attacks were taking a toll on her. Despite her composed exterior, he could sense the tension in her posture, the slight tightness around her eyes that suggested she was fighting to maintain her calm. "Actually," he said, his voice cutting through the tension, "I think this would be a perfect time for another dance." "Zara?" She took his offered arm gratefully. "I'd love to." As they walked away from the table, Ryan could hear Vanessa's voice rising in agitation behind them. "I can't believe he brought his secretary to this event. Does he have any idea how this looks?" "Keep your voice down," Chelsea hissed. "People are staring." On the dance floor, Ryan pulled Zara into his arms, holding her a little closer than was strictly proper for a waltz. "I'm sorry about them," he said quietly. "They're being horrible and you don't deserve any of it." "I can handle it," Zara replied, though he could hear the strain in her voice. "You shouldn't have to. The things they're saying, the way they're treating you, it's inexcusable." They danced in silence for a few moments, the music providing a peaceful refuge from the social battlefield they had just left. But Ryan could feel the tension in Zara's body, see the slight tremor in her hands despite her outward composure. "Why are you defending me?" she asked quietly, looking up into his eyes. The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" "Earlier when Chelsea was being cruel and just now with Vanessa. You could have just let them say what they wanted and stayed out of it. It would have been easier for you." Ryan considered her question seriously. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because..." He paused, searching for the right words. "Because you matter to me. More than I realized until tonight." Zara studied his face intently, as if trying to determine whether his words were genuine or just another performance for the elegant crowd around them. "Ryan, I need you to understand something," she said finally. "Whatever this is between us tonight, whatever you think you're feeling, it's complicated. Tomorrow we go back to our regular lives, where you're the billionaire CEO and I'm the assistant who brings you coffee and manages your schedule. It doesn't have to be that way. Doesn't it? Look around this room. Look at your friends, your ex-girlfriend, the world you live in. I had to spend my life savings just to look like I belong here for one night. This isn't my real life, Ryan. This is borrowed glamour that has to be returned in the morning." Her words stung because they contained a truth he wasn't ready to face. The gulf between their worlds was real, and it wouldn't disappear just because he was beginning to see her as more than an employee. "What if I want to bridge that gap?" he asked. "What if you get bored with the novelty? What if your friends convince you that I'm not worth the social complications? What if you decide that mixing business with pleasure was a mistake?" Before he could answer, the music stopped, and they were interrupted by the approach of Marcus Webb, the real estate developer who had been watching Zara throughout the evening. "Excuse me," Marcus said with a confident smile, "but I was hoping I might steal the lady for a dance." Ryan felt an immediate surge of possessiveness, but Zara placed a gentle hand on his arm. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Webb, but I was just telling Ryan that I needed to freshen up. Perhaps later?" It was a polite but clear dismissal, and Marcus had no choice but to accept it gracefully. "Of course. I hope we'll have a chance to talk more before the evening ends." As Marcus walked away, Zara turned back to Ryan. "I really do need a few minutes to myself. This evening has been intense." Of course. I'll be waiting right here. Zara made her way toward the ladies' lounge, moving gracefully through the crowd despite the emotional turmoil she was feeling. The evening had been a roller coaster of emotions, triumph at proving she could hold her own in this world, hurt at the cruel comments from Ryan's friends, and confusion about the growing connection she felt with Ryan himself. In the elegantly appointed lounge, she touched up her lipstick and took a few deep breaths, trying to center herself for whatever the rest of the evening might bring. Well, if it isn't the star of the evening. Zara turned to see Vanessa standing behind her, having followed her into the lounge. Without the crowd around them, Vanessa's mask of social politeness had completely dropped. "Vanessa," Zara said calmly, "I thought you were enjoying the party." "Oh, I am. Especially watching you play dress-up with people who will never truly accept you." Vanessa moved closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Do you really think this little performance of yours is going to last? That Ryan is actually interested in someone like you? Someone like me? Come on, we both know what this is. You're his charity case, his way of feeling good about himself by helping the poor little assistant. But once the novelty wears off, once his friends make it clear how embarrassing this all is, he'll drop you faster than yesterday's news." Zara felt each word like a physical blow, not because they were necessarily true, but because they echoed her own deepest fears. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said quietly. "Don't I? I know Ryan better than anyone. I know how he thinks, what he wants, what his world expects from him. And trust me, it's not someone who shops at discount stores and lives in Brooklyn. Is that what this is about? You're jealous because he's moved on?" Vanessa's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Jealous? Of you? Please. This isn't about jealousy, it's about reality. Ryan and I have history, we have a connection that goes back years. We understand each other's worlds, each other's expectations. You're just a temporary distraction. If that's true, then you have nothing to worry about." "Maybe not. But I hate seeing someone get hurt unnecessarily. And make no mistake, you will get hurt. Ryan's world doesn't have room for people like you, no matter how pretty you clean up." With that final cruelty, Vanessa swept out of the lounge, leaving Zara alone with her racing thoughts and aching heart. Standing in front of the mirror, Zara looked at her reflection one more time. The woman staring back still looked elegant and sophisticated, but now she could see past the surface to the uncertainty underneath. Was Vanessa right? Was she just a temporary novelty, a way for Ryan to feel progressive and charitable? The connection she thought she felt between them, was it real, or was she just projecting her own hopes onto a situation that was doomed from the start? She thought about her mother, fighting cancer in a hospital bed, about the emergency fund she had spent on this dress, about the life she would return to tomorrow regardless of what happened tonight. But she also thought about the conversation she had shared with Ryan on the terrace, the way he had looked at her when she was speaking with passion about things that mattered to her, the protectiveness he had shown when his friends were being cruel. Maybe Vanessa was wrong. Maybe there was something real happening between them. Or maybe she was just setting herself up for the kind of heartbreak that would make tonight's humiliation seem like minor inconveniences. Taking one last deep breath, Zara straightened her shoulders and prepared to return to the ballroom. Whatever happened next, she would face it with dignity. She had come too far tonight to give up now. When Zara returned to the ballroom, she found Ryan waiting for her near the entrance, his expression anxious until he saw her approaching. "There you are," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I was starting to worry." "I'm fine," she replied, though he could see something had changed. There was a guardedness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Did something happen? You look upset." Before Zara could answer, they were interrupted by the approach of the entire group, Brandon, Tyler, Chelsea, and Vanessa, all moving toward them with expressions of barely concealed anticipation. "Ryan, darling," Vanessa said, her voice artificially bright, "we were just discussing the most amusing thing. Chelsea was telling us about some bet you all made about tonight's entertainment." Ryan's blood ran cold. He looked at Chelsea, who was smiling with malicious satisfaction. "I thought Zara might be interested to hear about your little wager," Chelsea continued. "About whether she would show up tonight, how she would look, whether she would embarrass herself." "Chelsea, stop," Ryan said, his voice sharp with warning. But Chelsea was beyond caring about his warnings. The evening hadn't gone as planned, and she was determined to salvage something from the wreckage. "Oh, but it gets better," she continued, her eyes gleaming with cruelty. "Should we tell her about the betting pool? About how you all put money on whether she would make it through the evening without humiliating herself?" The words hit the gathered crowd like a bomb. Conversations around them stopped as people turned to listen to the drama unfolding. Zara's face went pale, but her expression remained composed. I see, she said quietly. Zara, let me explain, Ryan started, but she held up a hand to stop him. No need for explanations, she said, her voice steady despite the pain Ryan could see in her eyes. Everything is quite clear now. Actually, Brandon said, apparently deciding to join the attack, I think you handled yourself quite well tonight. Better than we expected, certainly. Though I suppose anyone can play a part for one evening. Brandon, shut up, Ryan snapped, his anger finally boiling over. But Tyler decided to pile on. Oh, come on, Ryan. We all know this was just a joke. A very successful joke, I might add. She actually fooled quite a few people into thinking she belonged here. The cruelty was breathtaking in its casual viciousness. These people, who had everything handed to them by virtue of their birth, were taking pleasure in tearing down someone who had worked for everything she had achieved. Ryan felt something snap inside him. All the anger he had been building toward his so-called friends, all the self-disgust at his own role in this cruelty, all the protective instincts he felt toward Zara, it all came together in a moment of perfect clarity. You want to know the truth? He said, his voice carrying across the nearby section of the ballroom. You're right. This started as a cruel joke. I invited Zara tonight because you all thought it would be funny to watch her struggle in a world where she didn't belong. Gasps came from the surrounding crowd. Several people had pulled out their phones and were recording the confrontation. But here's what actually happened, Ryan continued, his voice growing stronger. Zara didn't just belong here tonight, she was the most impressive person in this entire room. While you were all playing your petty social games and trying to tear her down, she was having intelligent conversations with senators, charming business leaders, and conducting herself with more grace and dignity than any of you have ever shown. Ryan, Vanessa tried to interrupt, but he wasn't finished. She has a master's degree in business that she earned while working full-time. She's been supporting her mother through cancer treatments while managing my schedule and running my professional life with more efficiency than I could have imagined possible. She speaks multiple languages, reads economic theory for pleasure, and has more genuine compassion in her little finger than the rest of us have combined. The crowd around them was growing larger, drawn by the drama and Ryan's passionate speech. And you know what the most pathetic part is? Ryan's voice was rising now, fueled by righteous anger. You're all so threatened by her intelligence and authenticity that you had to resort to cruel jokes and petty insults to try to make yourselves feel superior. Because deep down, you know that she's earned everything she has, while most of you have never had to work for anything in your lives. That's enough, Chelsea said, her face red with embarrassment and anger. No, it's not enough. Not nearly enough. Ryan turned to face the crowd that had gathered around them. I want everyone here to know that Zara Washington is brilliant, accomplished, and deserving of respect. And if any of you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me. The silence that followed was deafening. Phone cameras continued to record, capturing what would undoubtedly become social media gossip for weeks to come. Ryan turned to Zara, his expression soft with regret and something that looked like love. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm sorry for the cruel joke, for my friend's behavior, for not seeing how amazing you are until tonight. You deserve so much better than this. Zara looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Around them, the crowd waited with bated breath for her response. Thank you, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. That was unexpected. It was overdue, Ryan replied. You're the most remarkable woman I've ever met, and I've been an idiot for not seeing it sooner. Ryan, she said softly, this doesn't change anything. Tomorrow we still go back to our different worlds. What if we don't have to? What if we could build something real together? Before she could answer, the master of ceremonies approached with several photographers and a reporter from a prominent society magazine. Mr. Mitchell, Ms. Washington, he said with professional enthusiasm, we'd love to get a photo of the evening's most talked about couple. Your donation tonight was remarkable, and we understand there's quite a romantic story here. Ryan looked at Zara questioningly. The choice was hers. She could walk away now, disappear back into her regular life, or she could take a leap of faith with him. The decision would change everything, and they both knew it. One photo, she said finally, taking his offered arm. As the photographers positioned them and the flashes began to pop, Ryan leaned down to whisper in her ear. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that tonight changed me. You changed me. Zara looked up at him, seeing past the wealth and privilege to the man underneath. For the first time all evening, her smile was completely genuine. We'll see, she whispered back. We'll see. The photographs would appear in magazines and social media feeds. marking the beginning of a story that would capture the city's imagination. But for Ryan and Zara standing together in that moment, the real story was just beginning. 3 months later, Zara sat at her desk on the 42nd floor of Mitchell Technologies, but everything had changed. The office was the same, the view of Manhattan was the same, but she was no longer just an assistant managing someone else's schedule. The business card on her desk read, Zara Washington, Director of Social Impact Initiatives, and the work she was doing felt more meaningful than anything she had ever imagined possible. After that night at the gala, everything had moved quickly. The photos and video from Ryan's passionate defense had gone viral, turning their story into a modern fairy tale that captured the public's imagination. But more importantly, it had forced both of them to confront their feelings and decide what they really wanted. Ryan had been true to his word. Within a week of the gala, he had offered Zara a promotion to head up the company's new social impact division, focusing on education initiatives and community development. The salary was substantial, and the work was exactly what she was passionate about. It's not charity, he had explained when she expressed concerns about accepting the position. It's recognition of your talents and what you can contribute to this company. You've already proven you can handle anything I throw at you. Now I want to see what you can accomplish when you're pursuing your own vision. The transition hadn't been without challenges. There had been awkward conversations with former colleagues who weren't sure how to relate to her new position, skeptical articles in business publications questioning whether she was qualified for such a role, and ongoing gossip about her relationship with Ryan. But there had also been victories. The education initiative she had designed was already showing promising results in 3 pilot schools. Her presentation to the board about sustainable community development had earned a standing ovation and approval for a $5 million expansion of the program. And most importantly, her mother's cancer treatment was going well. With access to better doctors and experimental treatments that were no longer financially out of reach, Carmen Washington was responding well to therapy and had regained much of her strength. "You look happy," came a familiar voice from her office doorway. Zara looked up to see Ryan standing there with 2 cups of coffee, just as he had done countless mornings when she was his assistant. But now the dynamic was completely different. He was bringing her coffee because he wanted to, not because it was her job to anticipate his needs. "I am happy," she said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "The Henderson Foundation just approved our proposal for the mentorship program. We'll be able to help 50 more students next year." "That's fantastic," Ryan said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Though I have to admit, I'm a little nervous about the board meeting this afternoon." Zara raised an eyebrow. "You? Nervous? The man who just closed a $1 billion acquisition is nervous about a board meeting? This one's different. This one matters." She knew what he meant. Today's board meeting would determine whether their relationship could continue on its current trajectory or whether the complications of working together would force them to make difficult choices. The company had a strict policy about relationships between employees at different levels, and while Zara's promotion had helped address some of the power imbalance, the fact remained that Ryan was still the CEO and majority owner. They had been dating for 2 months now, taking things slowly and carefully. Ryan had been patient and respectful, understanding that Zara needed time to trust that his feelings were genuine and not just the result of guilt or novelty. Their first real date had been at a small restaurant in Brooklyn, far from the glittering world of Manhattan society events. Ryan had been nervous and charming, asking questions about her childhood, her dreams, her mother's condition, and really listening to her answers. "I want to know everything about you," he had said over dinner. "Not the professional version you show at work, but the real Zara. What makes you laugh, what keeps you up at night, what you want your life to look like in 10 years. It had been the beginning of something real and substantial, built on genuine connection rather than the artificial circumstances of that first gala. But they both knew that their professional relationship was becoming complicated. The board was concerned about appearances, other employees were gossiping, and business publications were speculating about whether Zara's position was legitimate or just an expensive way for Ryan to continue their relationship. "Whatever happens today," Ryan said, reaching across the desk to take her hand, "I want you to know that these past 3 months have been the happiest of my life." "Don't talk like this is goodbye," Zara said, squeezing his fingers. "We'll figure it out. What if the board says we can't continue working together? Then we'll have some decisions to make. But we'll make them together." The board meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock, and as the time approached, Zara found herself thinking about how much her life had changed since that night at the Plaza Hotel. She had proven that she belonged in this world, not because of what she wore or who she was dating, but because of what she could contribute. At exactly 2 o'clock, she and Ryan walked into the boardroom together. The 12 members of the board were already seated, their expressions serious and businesslike. "Thank you all for coming," Ryan began. "As you know, we're here to discuss the company's relationship policies and how they apply to Ms. Washington and myself." Board Chairman William Harrison, a distinguished man in his 70s, leaned forward. "Ryan, we want to be clear that our concerns are not about Ms. Washington's qualifications or performance. Her work on the social impact initiatives has been exemplary, and her results speak for themselves." "Then what are your concerns?" Zara asked, her voice calm and professional. "Appearances," said board member Patricia Chin. "The business community is watching this situation closely. Some are questioning whether your relationship began before your promotion, whether there was favoritism involved, whether this sets a problematic precedent for the company." "I understand your concerns," Zara replied. "And I want to be completely transparent with you. Ryan and I began dating after my promotion, but our working relationship had been developing over the 2 years I was his assistant. I earned this position based on my qualifications and performance, not because of any romantic involvement." "The question," said another board member, "is whether you can continue in your current role while maintaining a relationship with the CEO. The potential for conflicts of interest, for perceptions of impropriety, for complications if the relationship doesn't work out." Ryan started to speak, but Zara held up a hand to stop him. She had something to say and she wanted to say it herself. "I've given this a lot of thought," she said, standing up to address the board directly. "And I have a proposal." She walked to the presentation screen and pulled up a document she had prepared. "I'm proposing to take a leave of absence from Mitchell Technologies to pursue my MBA full-time, with the understanding that I would return in 18 months to head up a new subsidiary focused exclusively on social impact investing." The room was silent as the board members absorbed this unexpected development. The subsidiary would be legally separate from Mitchell Technologies, with its own board and its own funding sources. "I would be the CEO, reporting to a board that includes community leaders, education experts, and social impact specialists. This would eliminate any appearance of impropriety while allowing me to pursue the work I'm passionate about." Ryan stared at her in amazement. She had been working on this plan without telling him, preparing a solution that would address the board's concerns while advancing her own career goals. "Furthermore," Zara continued, "Ryan would recuse himself from any decisions involving the subsidiary's funding or operations. Our professional relationship would be completely separate from our personal relationship." "This is quite unexpected," Chairman Harrison said. "How would this subsidiary be funded?" "I've already secured preliminary commitments from 3 major foundations and 2 impact investing firms," Zara replied. "They're interested in partnering with someone who has demonstrated results in this space. Combined with an initial investment from Mitchell Technologies which would be approved by the board based on business merits alone, we would have sufficient funding to operate independently." The board members looked at each other, clearly impressed by the thoroughness of her proposal. "When did you develop this plan?" Ryan asked, his voice filled with admiration. "I've been working on it for the past month," Zara admitted. "I knew we needed a solution that would address everyone's concerns while allowing us to build something meaningful together both professionally and personally." Board member Robert Chang spoke up. "This is actually quite brilliant. It addresses all of our concerns about conflicts of interest while potentially creating significant value for the company's social impact portfolio." "I'd like to make one addition to the proposal," Ryan said, standing up beside Zara. "I think this subsidiary should be a completely independent entity, with Zara as the founder and majority owner. Mitchell Technologies can be an investor and partner, but this should be her company, her vision, her success." The gesture was both romantic and practical, demonstrating his commitment to supporting her career without trying to control or own it. "I'll need time to consider this," Chairman Harrison said. "But I have to say, Ms. Washington, this proposal shows exactly the kind of strategic thinking and leadership we hope to see when you were promoted." "Thank you, sir. I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss the details further." As the board meeting concluded and the members filed out, Ryan and Zara found themselves alone in the conference room. "You amazing, brilliant woman," Ryan said, pulling her into his arms. "You've been planning this for a month and didn't tell me? I wanted to make sure it was viable before I mentioned it. And I wanted to be sure you would support it even if it meant we wouldn't be working together directly. Are you kidding? I'm so proud of you I can barely contain myself. You're going to change the world with this company." "We're going to change the world," Zara corrected. "Just in a different way than we originally planned." 6 months later, Zara stood in the renovated office space in downtown Brooklyn that would house social impact partners, the company she had founded with support from Mitchell Technologies and several other investors. Her MBA was progressing well, her mother was in remission, and the pilot programs she had designed were showing remarkable results. Ryan appeared in the doorway, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing a grin that suggested he had good news. The Henderson Foundation just committed another $2 million to the education initiative, he announced. And Senator Richardson wants to feature your work in his upcoming legislation on education reform. That's wonderful, Zara said, accepting a glass of champagne. But you look like you have more news. I do. Ryan set down his glass and reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Zara's heart stopped as he dropped to one knee in the middle of her empty office. Zara Washington, he said, his voice thick with emotion, you've changed my life in every possible way. You've made me a better man, a better leader, and a better human being. You've shown me what real partnership looks like, what real love feels like, and what it means to build something meaningful together. Tears were streaming down Zara's face as he opened the box to reveal a stunning but elegant ring. Will you marry me? Will you be my partner in everything business, life, changing the world, raising a family, growing old together? Will you continue to challenge me and inspire me and make me want to be worthy of you every single day? Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, of course, yes. As Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, Zara thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a cruel joke, a bet among wealthy friends who saw her as entertainment. But it had become something real and beautiful and lasting. The woman who had walked into that ballroom in a borrowed dress and borrowed jewelry was gone, replaced by someone who had found her own power, her own purpose, and her own place in the world. And the man who had invited her as a punchline had become someone she could trust with her heart, her dreams, and her future. I love you, Ryan said against her lips. I love you too, she replied. And I can't wait to see what we build together. Outside the windows of their new office, Brooklyn stretched toward Manhattan, two worlds connected by bridges and dreams and the endless possibility of what could be accomplished when people saw past surfaces to the truth underneath. Their story had begun with cruelty and misconceptions, but it was ending with love, respect, and the kind of partnership that could change not just their own lives, but the lives of countless others. As they stood together in their empty office, planning a future filled with purpose and passion, Zara knew that she had found exactly where she belonged, not in Ryan's world or her own, but in the new world they were creating together. The joke had become a love story, and the love story was just beginning.